Fighting Harada is Japan's greatest boxer, a two-division world champion, who dominated the flyweight and bantamweight divisions. With relentless speed and aggression, he became a national hero, the only man to defeat the legendary Éder Jofre. His wars in the ring cemented his place in boxing history, but at 81 years old, time has not been kind to him. A man who once fought with boundless energy now struggles with the devastating effects of a brutal career. Years of punishment have left his body weakened, his health in decline, and his once sharp mind fading. Despite his legendary status, he never earned the financial security that today's fighters enjoy, leaving him to face his final years without the wealth his legacy deserves. This is the tragic reality of fighting Harada, a once great warrior now battling age, illness, and the painful truth that boxing has left him behind. Fighting Harada was born Masahiko Harada on April 5, 1943 in Tokyo, Japan, a nation still recovering from the devastation of World War II. The country was in the midst of rebuilding, and the people desperately needed heroes to inspire hope from a young age. Harada was drawn to boxing, seeing it not only as a sport, but as a way to carve out a future for himself and make a name that would be remembered. He turned professional at just 17 years old, stepping into the ring with a hunger and ferocity rarely seen in such a young fighter. Unlike the traditional, slick defensive boxes of the time, Harada brought an entirely different style to the ring, one built on relentless aggression, warming pressure, and an unshakable determination to break his opponents. He overwhelmed his competition with volume punching, incredible stamina, and a refusal to take a step backward. This fearless approach quickly earned him a reputation as one of the most exciting young fighters in Japan. By the time he was 19, Harada had already positioned himself as one of the top contenders in the flyweight division. Then in 1962, he got his first shot at greatness. He stepped into the ring against Thailand's Pun Kingpech, the reigning flyweight champion, and a formidable opponent, known for his experience and technical ability. But Harada didn't let the moment intimidate him. In a stunning display of speed and relentless aggression, he dominated the champion, stopping him in the 11th round to become the flyweight champion of the world. At just 19 years old, he had reached the pinnacle of the sport, bringing Japan a world title. In a time when such achievements were rare, the victory made Harada a national hero overnight. He was young, fearless, and the embodiment of the fighting spirit that Japan admired, but he wouldn't stop there. The best was yet to come. After losing his flyweight title in a rematch with Kingpech, Harada knew he needed to evolve. He moved up to bantamweight, where his natural aggression and relentless pace would prove to be even more effective. Over the next few years, he worked his way through the division, proving he was more than just a one-time champion. He was a force to be reckoned with. Then came the fight that would define his legacy. In 1965, Harada faced the undefeated Éder Jofre, widely considered one of the greatest boxers of all time. Jofre had never lost a fight, and many believed he was simply unbeatable. His combination of power, skill, and precision had made him a dominant champion, and few gave Harada much of a chance. But Harada refused to accept defeat before the fight even began. From the opening bell, he unleashed his signature relentless pressure, never giving Jofre a moment to breathe. He smothered the champion with non-stop punches, disrupting his rhythm and forcing him into a fight unlike any he had ever experienced. Round after round, Harada pushed the case, proving that, while Jofre may have been the more polished boxer, Harada was the tougher, hungrier warrior. After 15 ruling rounds, the judges rendered their verdict. Fighting Harada had defeated Éder Jofre, handed him the first and only loss of his career. It was an upset for the ages, and in that moment, Harada cemented himself as Japan's greatest boxer. Now a two-division world champion, he carried the hopes of his nation on his shoulders. He became the face of Japanese boxing, a symbol of perseverance and determination. For years he reigned as a champion, taking on all challengers, and continuing to push the limits of what was possible. But in boxing, time is undefeated, and as with all great fighters, Harada eventually found himself facing a battle. He couldn't win the one against stage, where, in the toll of a brutal sport, his time at the top wouldn't last forever, and soon the very style that made him a champion would become his downfall. Fighting Harada's aggressive, all-action style made him a champion, but it also ensured that his time at the top would be short-lived, unlike defensive fighters, who extended their careers by avoiding damage. Harada took punishment in order to dish it out. Every fight was a war, and every victory came at a price. As the battles piled up, so did the wear and tear on his body. In 1966, just a year after his historic victory over Éder Jofre, Harada faced the Brazilian legend in a highly anticipated rematch. This time the fight was even closer. The two warriors went toe-to-toe for 15 brutal rounds, and when the final bell rang, it seemed like Harada had done enough to retain his title. But in a controversial split decision, the judges awarded the fight to Jofre, ending Harada's reign as bantamweight champion. It was a devastating loss, but Harada wasn't ready to give up. Instead of staying at bantamweight, he decided to chase greatness once again, this time in the featherweight division. The idea of becoming a three-division world champion was tempting, and Harada believed he could overcome the size disadvantage with his relentless pressure and stamina. In 1969, he got his chance when he challenged Lionel Rose for the WB featherweight title. The fight was another grueling battle, showcasing Harada's signature style. He kept the pressure on, throwing punch after punch, but Rose's movement and counter-punching gave him the edge after 15 rounds. Harada lost a heartbreaking decision. He had come close, but the dream of becoming a three-division champion slipped through his fingers. Still refusing to walk away, Harada took another fight in 1970, this time against the rising Mexican star, Ruben Olivas. It would be the most punishing night of his career. Olivas, known for his devastating knockout power, was younger, fresher, and far less battle-worn than Harada. From the opening bell, it was clear that Harada was no longer the same fighter. The speed that once overwhelmed opponents faded. The iron chin that had carried him through so many wars was no longer holding up. In the fourth round, Olivas landed a brutal combination that sent Harada crashing to the canvas. He struggled to get up, but the referee waved off the fight. It was over. The man who had once been Japan's greatest boxing hero had just suffered the most brutal defeat of his career. And just like that, at only 27 years old, fighting Harada's boxing career was finished, while other fighters managed to extend their careers into their 30s and even 40s. Harada had simply taken too much damage too soon. His body had given everything it had to the sport, and there was nothing left to give. The speed, the reflexes, the durability, all of it had failed. The relentless style that made him a champion had also ensured that his career would be short. But the most difficult part of Harada's journey wasn't losing in the ring. It was what came after. There were no massive paydays waiting for him. Unlike modern fighters, who retire with millions in the bank, Harada had fought in an era where even world champions made far less money. There were no endorsement deals, no financial safety nets, and no pension to fall back on. Boxing had moved on without him. The cheers of the crowd were gone. The bright lights had faded, and Harada was left to navigate life outside the ring with little financial security and no clear path forward. For the first time in his life, he was no longer a fighter. He was just a man trying to figure out what came next. Fighting Harada built his career on relentless pressure, never backing down and never avoiding a fight. But now at 81 years old, he is facing the toughest battle of his life, one that he cannot simply fight through. Years of brutal wars in the ring have left him broken, both physically and mentally. The man who once overwhelmed opponents with speed and aggression now struggles with the simplest tasks, his body and mind deteriorating from the very sport that made him a legend. Like so many fighters before him, Harada is suffering from the long-term effects of repeated head trauma, the constant punishment he absorbed throughout his career, whether in fights, sparring, or grueling training sessions, has taken a devastating toll on his brain. Memory loss has become a daily struggle, and those closest to him have noticed the slow but painful signs of cognitive decline. Though he has never been officially diagnosed, many fear that he is experiencing the early stages of dementia, tragic fate that has claimed so many boxing greats. The symptoms are all too familiar: forgetfulness, confusion, and difficulty recalling even the most important moments of his life. Once sharp and energetic, Harada now faces moments of frustration as he grapples with the reality of his fading memory. It is a heartbreaking sight for those who remember him as the fearless warrior who once conquered two weight classes. But the damage is not just in his mind. His body, once an unstoppable machine, is now failing him as well. Decades of intense training, brutal fights, and extreme weight cuts have left him with severe, chronic pain. His knees, worn down from years of relentless movement, make walking difficult. Arthritis has set into his hands, the very weapons that made him a world champion. The simple act of standing up or moving around brings discomfort, a cruel reminder of the wars he once fought. Harada's struggles with pain are made even worse by the fact that he came from an era where fighters were expected to simply endure suffering. There was no specialized medical care, no advanced rehabilitation techniques, and no focus on long-term health. Fighters were pushed to their limits, told to ignore injuries, and sent back into battle before their bodies could properly heal. Now in his 80s, he is paying the price for the relentless grind of his youth. Unlike modern fighters, who have access to state-of-the-art medical care and financial resources to help manage their post-career health, Harada was left to deal with his injuries on his own. There was no structured support system for aging fighters, no pension to cover medical bills, and no proper rehabilitation for those suffering from neurological damage. The sport that made him famous did little to take care of him once he could no longer lace up the gloves. For Harada, every day is now a battle, not against an opponent in the ring, but against time, pain, and the lasting effects of a sport that took so much more than it gave. The once great warrior, who thrilled fans with his relentless energy, now struggles with the harsh realities of aging, left to endure the concert qualities of a brutal career, without the financial security or medical support that should have been afforded to a champion of his stature. The price of greatness is often unseen until it is too late, and for fighting Harada, the cost has been devastating. One of the harshest realities of fighting Harada's life today is the financial struggle he faces. Despite being one of Japan's greatest boxing legends, he never received the kind of financial rewards that modern champions enjoy. In his prime, he was a national hero, carrying the hopes of his country and cementing his place in boxing history. But as time passed, the riches and opportunities that should have come with such a legacy never materialized. Unlike today's fighters, who earn multi-million-dollar paydays, secure endorsement deals, and build long-term investments, Harada fought in an era where even world champions made only a fraction of what they deserve. His biggest fights, battles that defined his career, paid nowhere near the life-changing sums that boxers today take for granted. There was no guaranteed retirement fund, no structured financial support, and no pension waiting for him when his career ended. After retiring at just 27 years old, Harada had to find other ways to make a living. He stayed involved in the sport, working as a boxing trainer, passing on his knowledge to the next generation. His love for the sport never faded, and he dedicated himself to mentoring young fighters, hoping to guide them toward the success he once had. Later, he even served as the president of the Japanese Boxing Commission, using his influence to help shape the future of boxing in Japan. But despite these efforts, these roles never provided him with the kind of financial stability that would secure his later years. Being a trainer or a boxing official in Japan didn't come with massive paychecks, unlike retired champions today who can make millions through broadcasting deals, sponsorships, or business ventures. Harada's post-fighting career was never financially rewarding. Now at 81, Harada lives a modest life, relying on whatever savings he has left and the kindness of his community. Though he is still respected in boxing circles, the financial support that should be afforded to a national icon is nowhere to be found. Japan still honors its sporting heroes, but the financial backing that could have made his final years comfortable was never there for him. The contrast between Harada's struggles and the wealth of modern fighters is glaring. Today's boxing superstars make millions per fight, with additional income from endorsements, social media, and sponsorships. Fighters can retire with generational wealth, ensuring that they and their families are taken care of for life. But Harada, despite achieving greatness in the ring, was never given that luxury. Like many fighters of his era, he gave everything to boxing, his body, his health, and his prime years, only to be left with little in return. The sport that once celebrated him moved on, and the financial struggles that many retired fighters face became his reality as time moves forward. Fewer people remember fighting Harada for the warrior he once was. In Japan, younger generations celebrate the likes of Naoya Inoue, a modern superstar who dominates the lower weight classes in a way Harada once did. While Harada's name still holds weight among hardcore boxing fans, his legacy is slowly fading into history. Once he was the pride of Japan, the fearless fighter who conquered 2 divisions and handed Éder Jofre his first ever loss. His fights were legendary, his willpower unmatched, but today, the spotlight has dimmed, and the recognition he deserves is often overshadowed by the passage of time. Despite his struggles, Harada still finds joy in attending occasional boxing events. When he appears at ceremonies or fight nights, he is met with applause, honored for his contributions to the sport. In those moments, it's clear that he still holds a place in the hearts of longtime boxing fans. But outside of those events, his presence in the sport has largely faded. Unlike modern fighters, who maintain their fame through social media appearances, and business ventures, Harada's story is in danger of becoming a footnote in boxing history. The reality is that boxing, like many sports, is a business that constantly looks forward. It thrives on the next big star. The next rising champion. The past is celebrated briefly, but rarely remembered in the long run. Harada's name, once spoken with reverence, is now slowly being forgotten by the mainstream boxing world. His legacy remains intact in record books, in highlight reels, and in the memories of those who watched him fight. But the man himself has been left to deal with the consequences of a brutal sport that never took care of its heroes once they were no longer useful. The bright lights, the roaring crowds, the championship belts, they were all temporary. The damage he sustained, the financial struggles he faces, and the quiet reality of being a forgotten legend are all that remain. Fighting Harada's story is one of triumph, but also of tragedy. He gave everything to the sport he loved, but in the end, boxing took far more from him than it ever gave back. And now at 81, the real fight isn't in the ring. It's against time, against his failing health, and against being forgotten.